Welcome to Doe's Tales, the podcast where we listen, we relax, and we get sleepy. I am Jimmy, your host. Tonight, we begin with something soft, something slow, something that feels like autumn in your chest. So maybe dim the lights, put your phone down on the bed beside you, and let your eyes feel heavy. Somewhere far away, there was a small kingdom that most maps forgot. Not because it didn't exist, but because it didn't care much for being famous. It sat between orange forests and pale golden hills. The trees there always looked like they were in the middle of falling asleep. Leaves stayed stuck halfway between green and brown, as if autumn had decided to live there permanently. And through the center of this quiet land, a river moved slowly. Not fast, not loud, just slow enough to feel like breathing. People called it many things: silver water, whisper stream, and sometimes the river that sang names, because it did. At night, when the world softened, the river would sing. Not loudly, not like a performance, just soft enough to feel like a memory. It sang names of people, names of those who walked near it, names of those who had been there long ago. It never sang in anger, it never sang in warning, it simply remembered. And of course, nobody thought this was normal, but nobody thought it was strange either. It just was. In a cottage made of pale wood and ivy, there lived a girl named Elara. She was quiet, not shy, just calm. The kind of calm that makes people feel like sitting beside you without talking. Her hair was dark and long, always slightly messy, as if the wind had once tried to keep it for itself and gave up halfway. Her eyes were soft brown, the kind that looked like they understood slow things. She lived alone with her grandmother, who smelled like dried flowers and warm bread, and who never seemed surprised by anything, which is important. Because one evening, when the sky turned that gentle autumn purple, Elara walked to the river. She did it often. It was where she went when thoughts felt too big, or too small. The water barely moved, but then it sang. Elara. Her name floated up from the surface like it had been resting there for years. She froze. Most people would run, scream, trip dramatically over a root. Elara just sat down, because somehow she wasn't afraid. The voice wasn't loud, it wasn't deep, it wasn't magical in the dramatic way. It sounded like falling leaves, like slow wind, like old things that had learned patience. Elara, it sang again. She leaned closer. "Why do you know my name?" she asked the water softly. Because shouting felt rude. The river shimmered gently. "I know all names that are meant to be remembered." That should have been alarming, but instead it felt warm. Elara folded her hands in her lap. "Can you sing other names?" she asked. The river paused, not in hesitation, in respect. And then, quietly, it sang. Names of people she had never met. Names of people who had walked these lands before the village had houses. Names of children who once laughed by this very bank. Names of lovers who held hands and promised things that the river kept. The air felt full, like gentle music without sound. She sat there until the moon rose, and the stars slowly turned on one by one. That night, her grandmother didn't scold her for coming home late. She just poured warm tea and said, as casually as breathing, "So, it sang to you, didn't it?" Elara blinked. "You knew?" Her grandmother shrugged. "Of course she did." "It sings to the ones who listen," she said, "and to the ones who aren't afraid of being remembered." Elara stared into her cup. "Why me?" Her grandmother smiled, small, soft. "Because once upon a time your name was sung before you were born." The house was quiet. The fire made slow sounds. The world stayed soft. And somewhere, the river kept moving, softly, singing, remembering. And Ilara lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering what it meant to have your name remembered by water. The river kept moving. It always did. Soft, slow, calm, like it had nowhere important to be. And that was comforting. The girl walked beside it, boots barely making a sound on the moss. Her fingers stayed close to the water, not touching, just near. Because the river didn't like to be grabbed. It preferred to be respected. Very old river behavior, very emotional. She noticed something strange. The leaves weren't falling straight down anymore. They floated, softly, sideways, as if the air had turned into water and everything was learning how to swim. Autumn is getting dramatic, she whispered. The river, of course, sang. This time it sang a name that wasn't hers. It sang Elowen. The girl froze, not because she was scared, but because she felt warm. That name felt like soft candlelight, like a cardigan someone made for you without telling you, like a love letter left in a book you weren't supposed to find. She whispered back, "Who is Elowen?" The river did not answer with words. It answered with light. The surface shimmered, not bright, never bright, just enough to see shapes inside. She saw a girl, long hair, twisted with tiny wildflowers, bare feet, laughing without making sound, dancing on stones that didn't sink, and behind that girl, a boy. Of course, there was a boy. There is always a boy. He had a soft smile, the kind that never raised his voice, the kind that wrote letters instead of speeches, the kind that fell in love slowly, painfully slowly. The girl by the river felt something new, jealousy, which was rude. She didn't even know these people, and yet here she was, emotionally involved in ghost strangers. The river sang again. Love is soft here. She didn't say anything. She just sat down. The ground felt warmer near the water, like the earth had a heartbeat. She hugged her knees. Autumn deepened around her. Leaves turned darker gold. Air turned sweeter. The sky leaned closer to the earth. The river was quieter now, almost shy. It sang only one thing. Walk farther. So she did. The hidden garden. The trees grew closer together. Their branches touched overhead, forming a tunnel of color. Orange, red, soft brown. Everything smelled like old stories. She walked slowly, because when you walk fast in magical forests, bad things happen. She came to a clearing, and there it was, a small stone bridge, covered in moss, wrapped in tiny glowing vines. Under it, the water moved differently, slower, heavier, as if it remembered more things than the rest of the river. She sat at the edge. Her reflection didn't show her. It showed Elowen, the flower-haired girl, and behind her, the quiet boy. They looked peaceful. They looked sad. The river sang in a whisper. They were never brave enough. The girl's chest tightened, not painfully, just gently, like holding back a soft sigh. She understood. Elowen loved him. He loved her, and neither of them said anything. Of course, very classic, very tragic, very human. The river shifted. You are braver. She laughed quietly. She wasn't. She barely talked to birds, and birds were very polite. But she didn't argue. She simply touched the water, for the first time. It was warm, not hot, warm like hands held inside sleeves. The names started to rise again, softly, not loudly, like secrets, and among them, one name rose higher than the rest. Not Elowen, not hers. A new name, a name she had never heard, and somehow already missed. Part 3. the name that changed the water. Hey guys, tonight we continue floating gently along, because of course this river wasn't done whispering names. By the third week, Ilara had grown used to the way the river breathed. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it just existed, like a quiet thought you didn't realize you were thinking. And one evening, as autumn wind carried the smell of wet leaves and distant smoke, the river said something different. It didn't say a stranger's name. It didn't say an ancestor's name. It said hers. Ilara. She froze, which was reasonable. Rivers usually don't do that. The water brightened just a little. Not glowing, not magical fireworks, just softer, like moonlight spilled into liquid form, and the water moved slightly, circling the stone where she sat. Ilara, come closer. Now, was this dangerous? Probably, but it was said in the same voice as the other names. Soft, familiar, sad, not pushy. So she leaned closer. The surface of the river rippled and showed her reflection, but not quite right. Her face looked older and younger, and tired in a way she didn't recognize yet. You walk quietly, the river said. Because I don't want to make noise, she whispered back. That is not why, the river said. It flowed more strongly now, not rushing, just moving with purpose. You walk quietly because you are afraid your name is not meant to be heard. Ilara didn't reply, because it was true, and the river knew it. The water shifted again, showing another image, not her, a boy. He stood on a bank that looked like this one, but older, worn down, thinner. He held a stone, and he whispered toward the water, "Say my name." But the river stayed quiet. The boy waited. Nothing. And he walked away. Ilara, the river said. He was the first. She watched as the image shifted. Girls, boys, old men, quiet women, all sitting, waiting, whispering, all asking the same thing. Do you know me? You knew them? She asked. I knew them, the river replied. But I was not ready. The wind moved the trees. Dry leaves slid across the ground like soft footsteps. What changed? Ilara asked. The water swirled. You did. She laughed a little, because that was ridiculous. I didn't do anything. You listened, the river said, and somehow that felt heavier. That night, she returned home with the sound of her name wrapped around her heart like a soft thread. And something subtle shifted inside her. The world felt closer, like it leaned in slightly when she walked through it. A few days later, the village changed. Not loudly, not obviously, but people started looking at her differently. Not fear, not awe, just noticing. A shopkeeper paused before speaking. A baker handed her slightly warmer bread. Children went quiet when she walked past. And the river. The river started teaching her, not with lessons, not with instructions, but with names, names of people who were still alive. Elawan, Bram, Silas. She would see them later that day, and something in them felt open, like they were searching without knowing what for. Finally, one evening, Ilara asked, "Why do you tell me?" The river was quiet for a long time. Then, "Because you do not take." That confused her. "I don't take what?" The water shifted. "You do not try to fix them. You do not judge them. You do not give them answers." She shrugged. "I don't know the answers." The river sounded almost amused. "That is why." The moon rose higher, silver light touching the edges of the slow, patient water. Then the river said a name she didn't expect. Aaron. Her breath caught. That was her brother, gone for years. Not dead, just gone. "Why his name?" she whispered. "He stands where I cannot reach," the river said. "Where?" she asked. The water darkened slightly. Beyond the bend. Ilara stared. No one went beyond the bend. They said the river grew wild there, that the stones moved, that the water forgot itself. She swallowed, but her name was still warm in her chest. And now, his name echoed there too, and she knew soon she would have to follow it. The river went quiet again. Just water, just current. But now she understood. The names weren't just memories. They were paths. And she had just learned how to hear them. The listening stones of the willow bend. Hey guys, let's just float gently back to the river again. By now, the river was older, not louder, not faster, just older, like an old soul wearing water instead of skin. And Arin, she was older too, not in years, but in weight, the kind of weight that comes from knowing too many soft secrets. The village had learned something strange during this time. People started bringing stones to the river. Not big stones, not sharp stones, smooth ones, small enough to sit in the palm of your hand, warm from the sun. They didn't throw them. They placed them gently at the bend where the willows dipped their long green hair into the slow water. At first, no one knew why. One person did it, then another, then a third, because sometimes when they placed a stone down, the river would touch it, barely, like a breath, and their own name would appear on its surface, not carved, not scratched, just there, like frost on glass. Arin noticed this when she walked barefoot through the soft mud one evening. The sky was heavy with autumn clouds, the kind of clouds that look like they're thinking. She saw dozens of stones, each one with a faint silver name, some bright, some faded, some names she recognized, some she didn't. She knelt, picked one up. Her own name shimmered softly in the light of the slow-moving stars. Not glowing, not magical looking, just quietly there, like the river saying, "Yes, I know you." That night, the dreaming grew deeper. Arin didn't just see names. She walked through them. In her dreams, the forest was made of letters, trees shaped like looping handwriting, leaves shaped like tiny commas and periods, the ground soft with whispers. She walked barefoot. Every step said a name. Some names sounded like wind through tall grass. Some sounded like the soft crack of a fire at night. Some sounded like tears falling into water. And far ahead, she saw the source, a wide clearing, and in the center of it, a pool of silver water, still, perfect. Above it, stars slowly drifted in wide, lazy circles. This was where the river had learned to sing. This was where the river had learned to remember. When she woke, the village felt different. Not louder, not brighter, just more honest. People began sitting by the water without asking questions. They didn't ask for wishes. They didn't ask for answers. They just listened. Old men who had forgotten how to cry sat quietly. Young girls who were afraid of their own future dipped their hands into the cool current. Mothers pressed their palms together and whispered names they hadn't said aloud in years. And the river? It kept flowing, quietly, patiently, like it always had. One afternoon, a stranger arrived. He wore a long coat, worn leather boots, hat pulled low. He carried a notebook. He looked like the kind of person who wanted to collect stories but didn't quite know how to listen to them. He walked to the river. He scoffed a little, just a breath of disbelief. He said, "It's just water." The river did not react. It never did. He sat anyway, because silence makes people nervous. After a long while, he dipped his fingers into the current. Nothing happened. He tried again. Still nothing. Then he laughed quietly. the nervous kind. "See?" he said, even though no one asked. He was about to leave when a small stone rolled to his feet. He hadn't touched it. He hadn't moved it. It just arrived. He picked it up. There, faint and silver, was a name. Not his own. The name of a brother he had never spoken about. A brother he had buried quietly, long ago, far away. He didn't cry loudly. He didn't shout. He just sat back down and stayed until the stars came out. Aaron watched this from a distance. She didn't interfere. She never did. She only understood something new. The river wasn't magic because it changed people. It was magic because it let them feel seen without being judged. That autumn, the leaves fell slower, or maybe people just watched them more. The river sang more names. Some names were whispered, some names were sung softly, some names were only felt. Aaron began to understand something even deeper. The river didn't belong to the village. The village belonged to the river, and somewhere far upstream, the water had started as a single tear, or a single word, or a single forgotten name. She returned to the willow bend late one night. Fog wrapped itself around the trees. The stars were dimmer. The moon looked sleepy. She knelt and pressed both hands into the cool water. The river felt colder now, not in a bad way, in a calm way. And she heard something different, not a name, a question, soft, barely there. "Who are you?" when no one is calling you. She didn't answer out loud. She didn't need to. She just stayed there, breathing, listening, letting the answer form slowly in her heart. The river flowed, the stones shimmered, the village slept, and something unseen shifted gently in the water. The river's quiet secrets. The river did not sleep. It only rested with its eyes open, pretending to be still. Lyra walked beside it every evening now. Her footsteps were soft. Her presence was familiar. The moss began to grow greener where she sat. The fallen leaves started floating more gently when she whispered goodnight. Autumn had deepened. The air smelled like wet bark, distant smoke, and old stories that had been told too many times. The trees leaned closer to the water, as if trying to listen better. Branches swayed lazily, like tired arms stretching, and the river kept singing, not loudly, not proudly, but carefully, like it didn't want to wake something old. It sang names that didn't belong to people anymore, names of villages swallowed by fog, names of bridges that once stood strong, but now slept at the bottom of slow waters, names of promises people made while staring at their reflections. Lyra sat on a smooth rock and let her fingers trail in the cool current. The river said a name. It was unfamiliar, not hers, not anyone she knew. It sounded older than her village, older than the stones lining the banks. She whispered back softly, like she was afraid of breaking it. The river went quiet after that, not silent, just thoughtful. The wind passed through fallen branches and carried the sound of drifting leaves. Somewhere far away, an owl called once, then decided it was too much effort to do it again. Lyra leaned back and looked at the slow-moving clouds. She felt it again, that strange warmth in her chest, the kind of warmth that wasn't loud, wasn't exciting, just steady, like something familiar was getting closer, very slowly. The village began to change as well. People started sleeping more peacefully. No more sudden waking in the night. No more restless turning under worn blankets. The baker said his dreams had become soft and blurry. The candlemaker said she no longer felt lonely at night. The old man by the well stopped shouting at the air. No one knew why. No one tried to explain it. And the river, It knew, but it didn't tell. It just kept singing names and waiting. Lyra started bringing small things to the river: wildflowers, smooth stones shaped like sleeping animals, little pieces of colored glass that caught the fading light. She never asked for anything. She just placed them by the water and whispered, "I hear you." The river responded in the only way it could, by being there, by remembering. One evening, the sky burned softly with orange and gold. The sun lowered itself like it was tired of shining. Clouds stretched thin like brushed silk. The river sang again. But this time, it didn't sing a stranger's name. It sang hers. Lyra froze, not from fear, not from shock, but from the weight of it. She had never heard her own name from the river before. She didn't answer right away. She just listened. The water moved more carefully. The current softened. The reflection of the sky shimmered around her shadow. "Lyra," the river breathed again. She leaned closer. "Yes," she whispered. And for the first time, the river's surface rippled not because of wind, but because it was smiling. The river moved more slowly now, as if it had learned to breathe like a sleeping animal. If you walked along its banks in the late afternoon, when the sky turned soft gold and the air smelled like fallen leaves and distant smoke, you could almost hear it humming to itself. Not loudly, never loudly, just a gentle musical murmur, like someone remembering a song they once loved. Elia had grown used to that sound. She sat on the smooth stones near the water almost every evening, her boots off, toes dipped into the cool current. The chill didn't bother her anymore. In fact, she had started to think the river felt warm in its own strange way, like the kind of warmth that comes from being understood. She leaned her chin into her hands and listened. The names were different now. At first, when she was younger, the river had whispered names like tiny, flickering sparks, names of people she had never met, old women who once baked bread in stone ovens, children who had run barefoot through fields that were now forests, travelers who never finished their journeys. Now the names felt heavier. They stayed longer. They drifted through the water like fallen leaves that refused to sink. Sometimes the names were familiar. Elia. She froze. That had never happened before. Her own name slid through the river, soft and careful. Not loud, not demanding, just present. She straightened slowly, heart moving in a slow, lazy thud. The river's surface was calm. The reflection of the orange sky was almost perfect, broken only by the faint ripples around her feet. She whispered, "Why are you saying my name?" The river didn't answer right away. It just kept moving, just kept humming. And then, very softly, it replied with another name. Lauren. Her breath caught. She hadn't heard that name in years. Lauren had been the only other child who sat by the river with her when they were small. He had believed her stories, believed that the water could talk, believed that the names meant something. Until one autumn, until the leaves had turned copper and Lauren had walked into the forest and never come back. The village had searched, calmly, carefully, without panic, because this was the kind of place that accepted things quietly. Some doors, they said, were not meant to be opened. Some paths were not meant to be followed. Ilya's fingers curled slightly into the damp stones. "Where is he?" she asked, not to shout, not to beg, just to ask, the way you ask the sky why the clouds move the way they do. The river answered with a sound that wasn't quite a word. Not yet. Just a low, slow sound like a long breath. Then gently, "He is not lost." Elia blinked. "Then where is he?" A pause. a stretch of slow-moving water, a reflection of floating leaves. He is waiting. That word seemed to settle into her bones. Waiting. For what? For her? For the river? For something that hadn't happened yet? Elia sat very still. The world around her felt softer. The air was cool and smelled of moss and damp earth. Somewhere far away, an owl called out once, then went quiet again. She thought of Lauren's laugh, the way he used to throw stones that skipped terribly, the way he used to say the river sounded like it was practicing for a concert no one would attend. She almost smiled. "Why me?" she asked finally. "Why do I hear you?" The river flowed a little faster now, like it was choosing its words carefully. You listened. Elia let out a slow breath. That made sense, in a quiet way, in a way that felt like it had been true her whole life. Most people heard water. She heard stories. She heard memories. She heard names. Above her, the sky deepened into shades of purple and grey. The first stars began to appear, faint and shy, like they weren't sure they were welcome. Elia drew her knees to her chest and stayed there, listening as the river continued its low, endless song. This time, it whispered names of seasons, of golden mornings, of quiet goodbyes, of soft returns. And somewhere in that endless current, she swore she heard laughter that sounded very much like Lauren's, carried gently through the water like a memory that refused to fade. The forest leaned closer, the leaves stirred, and the river kept singing, softly, endlessly, like it always had, and like it always would. The name that refused to sink. Hey guys, let's drift a little deeper tonight, back to the river that somehow kept track of more stories than people ever meant to tell. By now, Lyra had learned something very important about the river that sang names. The river never rushed, it never shouted, it never demanded. It just waited. And that was somehow more powerful than anything else. Autumn had fully claimed the forest by this point. The leaves weren't just gold anymore, they were copper, amber, rust red. The kind of colours that made everything feel like a long exhale. The kind of season where even arguments sound tired. The water moved slowly now, thick with drifting leaves that spun in soft circles before floating away. Lyra had stopped asking if she was meant to be there. The river had made that clear without ever saying it. But that night, she heard a name that wasn't like the others. It wasn't ancient. It wasn't cracked. It wasn't heavy. It was bright. It sang. Erind. The sound lifted off the water like breath on cold glass. Soft, warm, alive. Lyra froze. She hadn't heard that name since she was very, very small. Erind wasn't a king, wasn't a hero, wasn't a spirit. He was the boy who used to sit beside her under the crooked oak tree and tell her the clouds had names. The boy who swore the moon leaned closer at night to hear their secrets. The boy who had left one autumn and never come back. She whispered to the river very quietly. Why him? The water slowed, the surface smoothed, and the river sang again. Because some names don't like being forgotten. The truth was gentle, the way soft rain is gentle. No thunder, no drama, just understanding. Lyra sat there for a long time, knees pulled to her chest, watching the reflection of falling leaves. The world looked softer in the water, safer somehow. She remembered how Erind used to say, "If I disappear, promise you'll remember my name out loud." She had laughed then. She wasn't laughing now. Erind, she said to the river. The water shimmered, not violently, not brightly, just warmly. And for the first time, the river did something new. It sang her name back. Lyra. Not as a warning, not as a call, but as recognition. She felt it in her chest, like a door opening that she didn't realize had been closed for years. That night, she understood something else. The river wasn't collecting names. It was protecting them, holding them, keeping them safe until someone was brave enough to remember. Days turned soft after that. Lyra started bringing fallen leaves to the river. She'd let them float while whispering names she still remembered. Old friends, lost neighbors, grandparents she barely knew. The river sang each one back, always gently, always patiently. And then one evening, something changed. The air felt heavier, not scary, just aware, like the forest was listening. Lyra dipped her fingers into the water, and she felt it. A name, not sung, not whispered, waiting. She closed her eyes. "Who are you?" she asked. The river paused, then answered. Someone who forgot themselves. The water shifted. It showed her something. Not like a sharp vision, but like a soft suggestion. A person standing at the edge of the forest, unsure, older, lost in quiet ways. Lyra's breath slowed. "Can I help them?" The river didn't sing. It simply moved. Yes, because that's what Lyra had slowly become. Not a keeper of secrets, not a ruler of magic, just someone who knew how to listen. And sometimes that's stronger. That night, as she walked home under skies full of slow-moving stars, she felt it for the first time. The softest pull towards something new. Not fear, not danger. A gentle invitation. The river wasn't done with her, and she wasn't done with it. Autumn wind brushed her hair as the leaves whispered around her feet, and somewhere behind her, carried through the trees like sleep breath. The river sang her name again, soft, safe, waiting, where forgotten names. Bloom. The river moved differently now. It flowed more slowly, not because it had to, but because it wanted to. The water had a softness to it, a knowing quality, like it was no longer rushing toward anything. Ilara walked beside it with bare feet in the cool grass. The air smelled like damp earth and late autumn flowers. That soft, gentle scent of things preparing to rest. The moon was thin tonight, a pale silver curve watching from above like it understood too much. Ilara's heart felt quieter, not empty, not full, just steady, which, honestly, felt new. The river sang again, not loudly, not dramatically, just a gentle murmur, names drifting across the surface like petals, not sad ones, not broken ones, soft ones, warm ones, names of moments, names of laughter, names of people who had been loved. And this time, she could feel the difference. The names weren't trapped. They weren't calling for help. They were simply being remembered. She stopped walking. She knelt beside the water. She dipped her fingers in. The water was warm, warmer than it had ever been. And when she lifted her hand, the droplets held. They didn't fall. They shimmered in the air like tiny stars. The river spoke without a voice. "You've changed." Ilara smiled faintly. "So have you." The river felt that somehow. Down its length, little lights began to appear. Tiny lantern-like glows along the banks. Flowers, but not normal flowers. Flowers made of memory, each one shaped like a small open bell, and each one humming softly. She stood slowly. "These weren't here before." "They grow where they're safe," the river answered without words. Ilara felt the truth of that settle into her chest. Safe. That word used to feel foreign. Now it felt possible. She followed the trail of glowing flowers, further along the bank, further than she had ever walked before. The forest changed as she walked. The trees grew taller. their leaves turning shades of deep gold and burnt amber. Autumn, caught in a permanent breath. No wind, no chill, just quiet. She saw something in the distance. Stone, old stone, half covered in moss, steps, and something like a doorway. She stopped. The river's voice softened. This is where the names rest. Ilara approached the stone arch. It wasn't a door, not really. It was an opening, a passage, a gentle invitation. There were carvings in the stone, names, hundreds of them, thousands, layered over centuries. She traced one with her fingertip. The name shimmered, then softened, then turned into a faint little light, floating upward into the trees. What happens to them? She asked. They become part of the world, the river answered, in ways too quiet to notice. She liked that. She stepped through the arch. On the other side, a field. Not grass, not flowers, just soft light. A sky that looked like dusk and dawn had decided to sit next to each other. And in the middle of the field, a figure, a shape, someone familiar, not in face, in feeling. The stranger, the one who had walked beside her long ago, the one who had said nothing, the one who had disappeared like mist. He was standing quietly, hands in pockets, looking around. When he saw her, he smiled. That took you a while. Ilara blinked. You're real? He shrugged. I am now. She laughed softly. It felt safe to laugh. What is this place? She asked. He looked around. Where names go when they're finally ready to stop hurting. He gestured around the field. Where people meet when they've learned to carry their own stories. She stood beside him. Their shoulders didn't touch, but they were close, comfortable. This is where I belong? She asked. He shook his head. No. He looked at her, gentle and sure. This is where you visit. She nodded. That made sense. The sky shifted, soft streaks of gold and silver, like the beginning of stars, or the end of them. They stood in silence, not awkward, not heavy, just still. Finally, he spoke. When you leave, you won't remember my face. She didn't like that, but she understood it. But I'll remember how it felt to stand here, she asked. He nodded. That's the part that matters. The light grew, brighter. The field softened. The stone arch appeared again. The river called gently, not urgent, just present. Ilara stepped back through the arch. The forest was still there. The glowing flowers hummed. The stone names now dim, soft, resting. She walked back to the river. It flowed, slow and calm. Did I do this? She asked. You helped it begin, the river answered. You let go of what was heavy. She sat by the water, pulled her knees to her chest, watched the surface ripple softly. The names that drifted now weren't trapped. They floated, they shimmered, they faded gently, like they were supposed to. Autumn leaves began to fall, one by one, softly landing on the surface, not sinking, just drifting. Ilara felt tired, not weak, not broken, just peacefully tired. The good kind, the kind that comes from breathing out for the first time in years. The river's voice softened. You no longer need to come every night. She smiled. I know, but I will, she added. The river felt warm. It felt full. Whenever you walk beside me, it said, you will hear a song. Not loud, not dramatic, just a gentle knowing. The sky dimmed. Stars began to form slowly above. The forest breathed. The river sighed. And Ilara closed her eyes. Just for a moment. Not to sleep. Just to feel the quiet. As the river meandered into the quiet reaches of the autumn forest, its voice softened, almost as if it too were ready to rest. The names it had sung all night, of the lost, the loved, the unspoken, lingered like a gentle breeze through the amber leaves. And there, on the banks, the girl listened, her eyes reflecting the silver sheen of the water, her heart quietly learning the rhythm of remembrance. She had spoken to the river long before the moon rose high, asking it to carry her secrets, her whispered wishes, and the small sorrows of a child who believed in the magic of names. And the river, ever patient, had done as rivers always do. It listened, it remembered, it kept. For in its currents were the stories of countless lives, flowing endlessly, shaping the world quietly and irrevocably. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and distant fires, and the girl felt it wrap around her like a soft shawl. She imagined the stars above, like tiny lanterns suspended in the velvet sky, twinkling in approval, or perhaps in amusement, at her long conversations with water and wind. For magic was not only in spells or fairy tales, she now understood, but in the gentle persistence of listening, of remembering, of naming the unnameable. As she rose to leave, her fingers brushed the surface of the river one last time. And in that fleeting contact, the river hummed softly, almost as if to say, "I will always carry your voice." The girl smiled, and in her chest bloomed a quiet kind of courage, the sort that comes not from swords or kingdoms, but from understanding one's own small place in a vast, magical world. The night deepened. Crickets chirped, the leaves rustled, and the moon cast a serene silver glow across the sleeping river. It sang her name once more, softly, as though bidding farewell. And she walked home beneath the tapestry of stars, knowing that the river's song was now a part of her, and she a part of its endless, gentle murmur. And with that, the girl who spoke to the river found peace. The world was vast and mysterious, yes, but it also listened, it remembered, and in its quiet, unassuming way, it cared. Thank you for wandering alongside us tonight. Dim the lights, breathe deeply, and let the river of dreams carry you into your own gentle, starlit sleep.